Muted.
Thank you for joining the iMobility Forum webinar. This time the webinar is focusing on procurement related funding instruments in Horizon 2020. I would like to go through a bit the agenda of today and really discuss with you the next. So this webinar will be moderated by me. My name is Lina Konstantinopoulou from ERTICO office, and I will briefly explain to you a bit what is in the context of this webinar. I will pass through to Ms. Katharina Zwick from AustriaTech, where she's going to introduce the topic and the related instrument of procurement. I would like also to welcome Mr. Vasileios Tsanidis from the European Commission, who will describe the funding opportunities for public procurement in the Horizon 2020, especially for the calls in 2016. And then we will discuss a bit how, in the context of iMobility support, and what is the related, I would say, milestones we are offering to the public procurers, what types of instruments or guidebooks in order to facilitate the deployment for ITS. And then another colleague from AustriaTech, Ms. Bianca Kapl, will introduce the P4ITS support activities also for PPI. Thank you.
Okay. Hello to the people who are still there. I hope you can hear me. I would like to give you just a very short introduction and on the topic why are these procurement-related funding instruments are important for the topic of ITS. And maybe Maria, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I guess most of you know these graphics from the year 2008, and this was in 2008 the vision how ITS and mobility will develop in the future. And since that date, a lot has happened so far. Next, please. Thank you. Next. Or can you hand over to me, or it's too complicated?
No problem. I shall do it. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So what we have seen here, we had this vision starting in 2008, and then we were doing a lot of projects, a lot of innovation, a lot of activities have taken place. And the next step coming from this vision is really to go towards the street, to go to the users, to develop directly the solutions and services on the street. And this is the background when we're talking about different deployment instruments when we're coming to the topic of procurement. So what we know is that, okay, next slide please. Thank you. That we have a lot innovation needed in the transport sector. So there is a lot to do if we can bring this vision down to the street and to the users, and we need to bridge what is happening in the R&D sector now and with these harmonized cross-border interoperable deployment on the street. And we need to find innovation procedures that can support this, exactly doing this bridging between the innovation, the R&D, which is often supply-side oriented, and the deployment of ITS, which is mainly doing demand-side oriented. And there is also need for procedures that deal with the efficient legal boundaries. Why I'm mentioning the legal boundaries? It's because in the ITS sector, you all know these, that the public bodies play an important and crucial role in ITS sector because of its nature, of the topic of infrastructure providers. And these public bodies are normally subject to the public procurement rules. And these public procurement laws and rules are very strict. So as a city or ministry, you are often very restricted by the rules given. So what has happened then? These procurement-related instruments we're talking today are an answer to especially these needs, to deploy in a harmonized way, considering the needs of the public authorities, maybe in the area of smart cities, and making use of the instruments that are already available, also on European level. So, as most of you maybe know, there are new funding instruments. I will present a little on, and Mr. Tsanidis will present today, by the European Commission to set initiatives to use new tools and instruments to deploy and to bring more innovation to the sector of ITS. And these procurement-related instruments are relevant for all public sector bodies, because I'm often asked, okay, why is this not relevant for industry or something? This is relevant because public sector bodies need to follow the specific public procurement rules. And especially when they're purchasing any goods and services. These procurement-related instruments are all based on the public procurement directives. There are national rules based on the European level, and they're all based on the same official documents. We give them a lot of restrictions, how to do the procedures, how many offers, and so on. And when we talk about procurement-related instruments, we're normally talking about 3 types of instruments. But it's not coming here. Yeah, perfect. Now it's here. We divide between the, I would say, regular, normal procurement instruments, then one of the new tools, the public procurement of innovative solutions, and the pre-commercial procurement and all. So public procurement of innovation is when we talk about buying innovative solutions by a public procurer that are nearly to the market but not on the market yet, where you need some small kind of adaptations but not a lot of R&D, small kinds of adaptations, or you buy this as a first buyer at all. So when public authorities act as first customers in the for new innovative solutions in the ITS sector, they have to deal with the topic of public procurement of innovation. And on the next slide, we see the pre-commercial procurement. And pre-commercial procurement, on the other hand, is not it's a procurement of R&D. So pre-commercial procurement is relevant when it comes to a point where as public authority you have a special need, a problem that needs to be solved, and R&D is needed, but you don't know how the solution should exactly look, and the market is not offering the solution yet. And pre-commercial procurement will help you to identify and compare alternative solutions in a step-by-step approach, starting with the feasibility, prototyping, development, and so on. I'm sure my colleague will go more into detail, but just have in mind that this is procurement of R&D for new solutions before they are commercially available. And this is just important to have in mind when we now start into the different topic of the calls. So on my next slide, that will come in a minute, you see the different phases of pre-commercial procurement. So there is often a combination between pre-commercial procurement and public procurement of innovation. Why? Because we're first starting with identifying, comparing solutions, sharing the risks and benefits between suppliers and procurers. And then after the end, you have the basis to do real procurement afterwards. And often then public procurement of innovative solutions, the PPI, is coming up. So it's often a combination of both tools that is necessary. So as a public procurer, you should just be aware that there are different tools for you as public body to do innovation, to deploy innovative solutions on the streets, especially in the ITS sector. And there are funding instruments, especially based on this, which can give either more incentives to try out new tools. And I would like to start to stop my presentation here, but what we will like to show you in today's webinar is to learn on the current funding opportunities, which will be done now by the European Commission, but also give you an insight on how can iMobility support and P4ITS project support you when you try out these new tools and find the optimal solutions for you to boost the innovation in the ITS sector, and we would like to share some experience and learnings. Yeah, so this is from my side, and I would like to hand over again to my colleague. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Katharina. I have now we will pass to Mr. Vasileios Tsanidis to present on the I would say the Commission framework. So I give the floor to you, Mr. Tsanidis.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can hear me. I will start my presentation from the point that where the previous presentation stopped, by showing you this slide, this picture, which is our famous picture on innovation procurement. What is innovation procurement for Horizon 2020? For innovation procurement is comprised of two different types of procurement, pre-commercial procurement and public procurement of innovative solutions. What is a pre-commercial procurement, PCP? PCP is a procurement to buy R&D services and only R&D services. As you can see in this slide, pre-commercial procurement PCP is structured around three different phases. Phase 1 is about solution design, phase 2 is about prototype development, whereas phase 3 is about testing some innovative, some first-hand products or services. As you can also see on the slide, the number of suppliers is reduced when we pass from one phase to another. As you can see, in phase 1, for example, participate 4 suppliers, whereas in phase 2 we have only 3 suppliers, and in phase 2 we have at least 2 suppliers. We may have more, but at least 2. Our intention is to test at least 2 innovative solutions in order the procurers to have options for further deployment of the solutions. And with phase 3, PCP stops. PCP is not about commercial purchase or deployment of the solution. It's about to test and to de-risk new technologies. As also you can see in PCP, phase 0, curiosity-driven research is skipped. For PCP, what is important is to build our process, our procurement on a concrete public need. So this is important also for our PCP and KPI project proposals in the framework of Horizon 2020, a clear identified public need. Also, what is important is that PCP lies in the scope of the EU procurement directives, meaning that the previous slide, please. Meaning that PCP allowing us that to have certain provisions like the one we have in Horizon 2020, that the majority of R&D should take place in Europe. What is also important to note for PCP is that the suppliers keep the generated IPRs through this procedure for further commercialization, and this is also reflected in the price, because they offer lower price compared to the price that they would have offered if they would have kept the generated IPRs. So it is a win-win situation for both, for the procurers and for the suppliers, because the procurers buy cheaper R&D and the suppliers keep the generated IPRs for further commercialization of the generated innovative solutions, of the developed innovative solutions through this PCP. And let's face it, why do the public sector need the IPRs? The public sector needs only the free use of the generated IPRs, which it acquires through PCP, and leaves the commercial part of these IPRs to the suppliers, to the public, to the private sector. So if the procurers are happy with the solutions that were developed through PCP, they can launch a PPI with a legally different procedure compared to PCP. It's about the purchase of the innovative solutions and deploying these innovative solutions. PPI is a normal procurement procedure. It is open to every potential supplier, not only to those that have tested their solutions in phase 3, but all the suppliers that participated in the PCP, but also open to every other potential supplier that has in the meantime developed an innovative solution and he hasn't participated in the PCP. A PCP may or may not proceed a PPI. So there are some cases where the procurers are sure that the market is capable of offering an innovative solution. I forgot to mention that PPI, what is important to note for PPI is that PPI is a procurement where the public sector is a launch customer, buys as a launch customer this innovative solution and wants to deploy them in its own services. So in cases where the public sector is sure that this solution that lies close to the market is sure about the possibilities about this innovative solution, they can go directly through to a PPI without a PCP preceding a PPI. Next slide, please. As you can see, since the year 2007, where the PCP communication on PCP was launched, there has been a lot of progress. In 2015, a lot of countries have PCP's projects ongoing or finished. Next slide, please. Recently, DG Connect launched and published a study about quantifying the impact of PCP in Europe. What this study measured? It measured PCP, the impacts of PCP against two different types of procurement of R&D services. The first type was a procurement of R&D services contracts where the generated IPRs were kept by the public sector, not by the suppliers as it is done in PCPs. And the second type of procurement was procurement of R&D services and deployment in the same contract. And the next slide, please. And the findings were very impressive. That according to this study, PCP has a positive impact on the improvement in the quality and efficiency of the public services. Has a positive impact on the reduction in the risk of failure in large-scale follow-up PPIs. This is normal because through a PCP we can de-risk large deployment that is possible through PPIs. Positive impact on the increase in the efficiency of R&D expenditure. Also, it helps shorten time to the market for SMEs, and also positive impact on the reduction of the supplier lock-in and increased exploitation of IPRs and R&D results in general, which is normal because the IPRs are being kept by the participant suppliers. Next slide, please. Now, what kind of support is provided in the framework of Horizon 2020 to innovation procurement PCP or PPI projects? Next slide, please. We offer three types of support, three forms of support: coordination and support actions, CSAs. What are these CSAs? They are actions that prepare the ground for future PCPs and PPIs, enable the networking between groups of procurers to identify common challenge, to do open market consultation with industry, and perhaps to start drafting the tender documents. These CSAs, these coordination and support actions, do not offer support to procurement, to PCP or PPI procurements. They only prepare the grounds for future PCPs or PPIs. The funding rate for these CSAs is 100%. Now, the PCP actions, they provide co-financing for the PCP procurement, the actual procurement price, as well as relevant coordination and preparatory activities for the PCP. The funding rate for the PCP actions is 90% for all the activities taking place, eligible activities taking place in the framework of these PCP actions. And PPI actions, the same coordination and preparatory activities plus the actual procurement price through PPI. 35 flat co-funding rate for all eligible activities in the framework of the PPI actions. Next slide, please. Please note that these funding rates, 90% and 35%, are increased funding rates compared to the previous work program, where the funding rates for PCPs were only 70% and for PPIs 20%. Now, some participation requirements for PCP and PPI actions. Three for the participation requirement for all Horizon 2020 projects, minimum 3 independent participants from 3 different member states or associated countries, and an extra participation requirement for PCP and PPI actions, not for CSAs, minimum 2 public procurers from 2 different member states or associated countries. These 2 public procurers, they form the buyers group that I will explain in my next slide. In this buyers group of at least 2 public procurers from 2 different member states or association countries, we can have additionally private or NGO procurers that offer the same services of public interest. For example, we have 2 public hospitals that offer that participate in the the buyers group from 2 different member states. Additionally, in this buyers group, a private hospital can also participate in the PCP actions. So, beyond the buyers group, we can have also other beneficiaries participating in the PCP or PP action, not in the buyers group, to prepare, to help the procurers coordinate the action, prepare the call for tenders, in general to assist the procurers in all the related activities. These entities can be either public or private, that can participate in our PCP or PP action project, but on one condition, that they won't participate as suppliers in the call for tenders that will be launched in the framework of the PCP or PPI action, because in that case we will have a conflict of interest. Next slide, please. Buyers group and lead procurer, very important concepts in the framework of our PCP and PPI action calls. Buyers group. What are the buyers group? As we said, at least 2 procurers from 2 different member states, which have either the mandate are responsible for the acquisition and or regulatory strategy of the targeted solutions, or are entities that they have received the mandate from one or more of such procurers to procure and to buy in the name of and on behalf of the procurers that actually have the mandate. The entities that we refer to, for example, would in this case would be the central purchasing bodies in the member states. Sole participants. Also, sole participants are eligible to participate in our PCP or PPI action calls under in case they, of course, provided that they meet the participation requirements that I explained in my previous slide about 3 minimum beneficiaries from and plus 2 minimum procurers from 2 member states. So an NGO, which is a structure, which is an entity that is common in the regional, the structural funds area, or European Groupings for Territorial Cooperation, or European Research and Transaction Consortia, are entities that are can participate as sole participants in our PCP or PPI actions. Lead procurer. Another important concept in our PCP or PPI actions, who is the lead procurer? Is a public entity that may or may not participate in the buyer's group, but it is the entity that procures in the name and on behalf of the public procurers of the procurers in the buyer's group. The law of the lead procurer is the applicable law of the whole procurement process. Next slide, please. So for PCP and PPI actions, what is important to note in the framework of the proposal preparation? We have PCPs and PPIs will tackle, every PCP and every PPI will tackle one concrete common channel that is shared among the members of the buyer group. It is important to set key performance indicators in targeted quality or efficiency improvements for the PCPs or PPIs, and the participation in a future PCP or PPI to be somehow embedded in the innovation strategy of the participant procurers. Next slide, please. What is funded under PCP actions? One joint PCP call for tenders, one joint PCP procurement. So one joint call for tenders, one joint evaluation of tenders, one lead procurer that awards all contracts in the name and on behalf of all procurers in the buyer's group. What the suppliers get after this call for tenders, the successful suppliers, they sign a framework agreement with the procurers, with the lead procurer, and a contract for phase one. If they will continue for phase two, this remains to be seen after the evaluation in the way that I explained in the first slide. Next slide, please. For PPI actions, the same, one joint call for tenders published EU-wide, one joint evaluation of offers, but contract award in the PPIs can be centralized or distributed, meaning that the lead procurer can award all contracts to all suppliers on behalf of the procurers in the buyer group, or the lead procurer is awarding, will award a framework contract with lots, one lot per procurer, and individual contracts in the framework of these lots can be awarded by the local procurers. So we will have core functionality and performance requirements in the call for tenders, but additionally some local functionality requirements can be added by each procurer in the contract that he will sign. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned briefly in my previous slides, what is covered by PCP and PPI actions, two stages, the preparation stage, which contains the open market consultation and perhaps the verification of market readiness to meet the procurement need, and what we expect as an outcome of this preparation stage, common tender specification and joint procurement agreement. Execution stage. Here we cover as eligible activity actually the same procurement cost of to buy R&D services through PCP or innovative solutions through PPI. Also some follow-up activities like in PCP, the validation of the performance of the competing PCP solutions solutions against jointly defined criteria in real-life operations can be included. In PPI, the evaluation of the results of deploying in the solutions in real-life operational conditions can also be included. Also, as in every Horizon 2020 project, dissemination and exploitation of results. And some other relevant networking activities can be preparation of a follow-up PPI, if we talk about PCP, contribution to standardization, regulation, certification, you name it. Next slide, please. What is the reimbursement? The reimbursement rate for direct costs for PCP actions is 90% flat rate for every participant in the consortium, and 35% for PPIs for PPI actions for every participant in the consortium, the same as the PCP. So what we consider as eligible activities in the framework of the PCP or PPI actions. As I mentioned, the price of the R&D services for PCPs or the innovative solutions, the purchase of the innovative solutions for PPIs, eligible coordination and networking activities, also some in-kind contributions, and of course, what is an eligible cost unless the beneficiaries can deduct it. Also, please note that for the networking and the coordination and networking activities cannot comprise more than 30% of the requested reimbursement from the European Commission for PCPs, and not more than 50% for PPIs. On top of this, you should also note that 20% flat reimbursement rate is provided for indirect costs, but not, of course, for the procurement price, because there we don't have indirect costs, and also for third-party resources that are not used at the beneficiary premises. There are two pre-financings. Yes, one when you start the project for the preparation state, and one before the execution state, just before the launching of the call for tenders. Next slide, please. So it is important to note that there are special evaluation criteria for PCP and PPI actions. Therefore, it is recommended to structure your project proposal around to these evaluation criteria. For example, in excellence, special focus is placed on the progress beyond the state of the art in terms of the degree of innovation needed to satisfy the procurement need. For the impact, the expected impact listed in the work program under the relevant topic, the strengthening of the competitiveness and growth of companies by developing the innovations meeting the needs of European and global procurement markets. Effectiveness of the proposed measures to exploit and disseminate the project results, including management of IPR, and more forward-looking concrete procurement approaches that reduce fragmentation of demand for innovative solutions. For the quality and efficiency of the implementations, please note the participation requirements that are applicable for PCP and PPI actions. So, just to summarize this, the information regarding for this slide, please structure your project around these three evaluation criteria: excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency of the implementation. Next slide, please. Here we have, next slide, an overview of the Horizon 2020 goals that will support PCP and PPI actions in 2016 and 2017. You can see that we have allocated around 130 million euro to support PCP and PPI actions in every areas, like in health, like the ICT-based solutions for any area of public interest. We have also some CSA actions that support urban transport deployment, etc. This is for you to study to see where you can submit some proposals. Next slide, please. More detailed information about the PCP and PPI actions with the deadlines in red for you to prepare accordingly. I think that's all from my part. If you next slide. And this is the PPI actions with coded lines in red and the CSAs. Next slide, please. Yes, these are the CSA, the coordination and support actions, and yes, some more information. If you have questions about PCP and PPI actions, you can visit our webpage, the Digital Agenda webpage on innovation procurement, where you can also download and find frequently asked questions about the Horizon 2020 PCP instrument and the Horizon 2020 PPI instrument. Thank you very much. That's all for my part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsanidis, for the excellent presentation. And I'm sure if there are any questions, we can surely put them into the last session of today. And maybe if you can, I would say we can contact you for the next part. So now the next presentation is by Ms. Katharina Zwick, just to show how iMobility support can really support pre-commercial procurement. Katharina, the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Just waiting for the presentation to be started. Thank you. Oh, I can. One moment, we will start immediately. Thank you.
Yes.
So I would like to show you, after this presentation of Mr. Tsanidis, you see there are a lot of opportunities also to get funding for your pre-commercial procurement initiatives on the European level. And as you have seen, there are especially also in the ICT sector, but I think there are some interesting calls, especially in the ICT sector, which are relevant for ITS. So what I would like to show you now is what iMobility Support Project has elaborated in the last 3 years, and especially recently published, to support you not only to prepare a good proposal, but furthermore to prepare a good, efficient and high quality pre-commercial procurement project. So as you have seen by Lina before, iMobility Support really is looking to support the deployment of intelligent mobility in Europe. And one part is dealing with supporting public procurement procedures for ITS. And what we have done is 3 different types of tools. It's always hopping back a little bit. 3 different kind of tools, which are, okay, don't know what is happening. Next slide. Yeah, now it's working. We have developed 3 different types of tools to support you to know what is going on pre-commercial procurement in the, especially in the ITS sector. Who are my contact partners? Who can be interesting organizations for me to work with? What has already been done? And how really to do this? So what we are doing are annual Pcp reports. You can find off the iMobility Support website. I will show you the link later on, which is is always dealing with the current status of PCP and has a special focus every year. So last year in 2014, we were very much focusing on the lessons learned in the first PCPs finalized so far, for really giving you an idea what you have to cope with and what do you have to think about when you're starting a PCP project. This year's project will also look at the current status, the upcoming developments, also what has been recently funded on European level, and what are the challenges, what has to be done in the next years for PCP. So we are doing different kind of info days, doing presentations, supporting you, especially also within the iMobility forum, that you can have a platform to deal with and to talk with others and to discuss with others, and also doing webinars like today. So you will also get the slide afterwards. You can look up something. And what has recently be published and today on the iMobility support website is the so-called PCP Handbook, or the PCP for ITS guide, which should be a basic tool now for you to use when you're starting a PCP project. And this is what I would like to present in the next few minutes, to know, okay, what can you get out of this PCP for ITS guide? The background is in 2011, the P3 ITS project published the first published handbook on PCP for ITS. But so far, especially since 2011, a lot of developments have taken place on legal on current legal level for public procurement of innovation, on the developments, the funding instrument has been established on the European Commission. So a lot has happened, and we would like to adapt what was already written here to the current needs. People need to know other steps, other partners. They need to know about the experiences gained so far, get an insight on the recent examples, and really consider the current legal framework and the European developments now. So we started to create the PCP guide. And what is new in this PCP guide? It has a special focus on pre-commercial procurement. So we're not dealing with all kinds of instruments, but we're setting PCP in the context to get you an idea, okay,
Yes, Katharina? Katharina? Hello?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for unmuting me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep. Okay. Okay, perfect. The connection got lost, and then I was unmuted by muted by the tool. So I'm back again. So for the PCP guide, we're really looking towards ITS. We will try to show you in the PCP ITS sector, and also from the examples we are showing in the handbook, they're really looking towards intelligent mobility. It is especially written for newbies, which means it is a really step-by-step guide helping you how to start, what to prepare, what questions to think about, and that it's mainly written from the public procurer's perspective. This does not mean that it's not relevant for the industry to have a look in this guideline, but it is important that we write it from the public procurer's perspective, because as I mentioned before, public organizations are important in the ITS sector when it comes to deployment, and therefore it's important that they start these initiatives. So main content of this guideline is to understand really the benefits and challenges, how to apply the procedures, what are the main steps. We're breaking everything down into different steps. steps. We were showing the questions you need to answer if you're doing a pre-commercial from the practitioners. But we have to say that it's no detailed legal handbook. So we cannot offer this as pre-commercial procurement is not only a funding instrument on the European level, as Mr. Tsanidis presented before, but it is also an instrument that can be used on national level. And therefore the guidelines are different. So please don't expect all detailed legal recommendations, but expect something that will help you to set up your pre-commercial procurement project. So going to the next slide, please. The pre-commercial procurement guide is, I'm going very quick over this, is divided into 4 main parts. And part 1 is really giving you an introduction, showing pre-commercial procurement in the context of other instruments like the normal funding instruments, R&D funding, or normal pre-commercial procurement, and also PPI, that you know what is really what you're dealing with, and it's giving the definition as given by the legal framework. In part 2, and this is important, we are really trying to show which are the actors in the pre-commercial procurement process you have to deal with. We have on the one hand policy makers, strategy makers, we have the public procurers itself, like the infrastructure providers, maybe universities, cities, ministries, with co-financing organizations like Vinnova in Sweden. We have the public as users, so they're really important and often get lost in this whole PCP process. And we have the supply side with the which are the software developers, the industry, and so on. And we are spotlighting the different roles and how they interact in the PCP process, and giving the steps to prepare and implement a PCP project. The third part is maybe also interesting for people who are not doing the first time a PCP. This is really depicting the case studies. So we were looking on 4 different case studies, 2 transnational pre-commercial procurements from the mobility sector and 2 national pre-commercial procurements. And what we were dealing not only describing what is the PCP design and where the different steps, but also to giving experiences from the PCP leaders and lessons learned from these PCP. And in part 3, a special section is dealing only with recommendations with PCP newbies to give you an idea what are the really challenges and what is recommended when you start with. And just to going to the last part, you will also find for sure further information, like where you can go to, like we have seen from the European Commission. There is much more information on this, but this is the first guide to start in the topic. So what we have for you in the PCP guides is not only contact data, because we think it's important to get in contact with people who already perform PCP, but we have furthermore quotes and experiences really to get an insight, to get an idea what people were dealing with, and a lot of green boxes, and these green boxes mean tips for you, and we still hope they're helpful for you. And yeah, before I'm going to the next slide, I have picked out some of the recommendations we included in the handbook to give you an idea what can recommendations for PCP can look like. And we split them into the different phases. So when you remember the slide of the European Commission, you start with these phase 0, which is kind of a preparation phase, and then in the PCP process, and then you have the subsequent procurement. And we splitted it and trying to give you an overview. So what could recommendations look like? When you're preparing and start a PCP, think always about you have to start with a need. And this sounds very easy, but it is not always. So what we have learned from the PCP practitioners, from our work in the last years, is that you really have to look at your problem. What in your company? What service do you want to make more efficient, more easier for the users with different features? And then first you have really to define, okay, what is your need? What do you want to change? And then decide about the instruments. Pre-commercial procurement is a promising tool, and it could be very helpful when it comes to finding solutions for no challenges. But it's not a silver bullet solution. And yeah. And this is important, and we would like to help you to find your right solutions. Another point is to reserve enough time to formulate your PCP problem. This is often, as I'm coming myself from a technical sector, normally you want to describe a solution at the beginning. You want to describe how you want the solution to look like. But for pre-commercial procurement, you should really start open. You should formulate your problem instead of your solution. And this is very unusual, like we do normal proposals. And this is important for the rest of the process, because then you are open for real innovation, for radical R&D. When it comes to the PCP phase itself, on the next slide, we see that you need to plan time to develop a common understanding in the PCP process. In a PCP, you normally work with people from the technical department, legal department, procurement department, with the management, and the whole company have first to develop a common understanding. Otherwise, you're working in different directions. I know this could be helpful also for normal project, I would say, but for PCP, this is really crucial because of the different phases. You need to involve the users, the people who benefit from the solution, to really define the needs before. And you have to consider the legal aspects. Especially in PCP, legal aspects are a crucial factor, not for the PCP itself, but also for the subsequent procurement. So I can just really, really recommend from my personal experiences, involve legal experts right from the beginning. Try to involve them in the phase where you develop this common understanding. As PCP is sharing rights and benefits between the public procurer in the PCP process and the supplier, you really need to deal with this issue. On the next slide, for this phase, what I said before, you need to offer a degree of flexibility to create space for innovation. This is also very important for the PCP phase itself, and expect the unexpected. I'm just saying this because it is important that you are flexible in a way, that you have mitigation plans, that you have support to deal with maybe some vendors or suppliers are backing out because they don't like your contracts. You don't have enough tenders in the different phases. As you heard before by the European Commission, this is a competition process, and you need more than one. Supplier. So just expect the unexpected, and I think you will be totally prepared for this. So on my next slide, I can just say be aware that problems can happen, but don't expect you can avoid everything. So you need to stay flexible and calm, use the support you have, and furthermore, learn from others. We will show you also for PPI, the network, before we show you some links to further information. Please use this information when you try now to think about what proposals to prepare for the next year. And always think about the subsequent procurement of PCP in advance, so that you really know before how to deal with these purchasing of the innovative solution afterwards. It's not only doing a project, it's about really bringing innovative solutions to the ITS sector. So I hope you're curious to look in the PCP guide. The version is already out now, you will find it on the iMobility support website. So the link is here. You can also Google it. And yeah, I hope you will find a lot of interesting information within these guidelines. If my next slide shows up, you can also send your questions to me. And I thank you for still attending. We are looking forward also to receiving your feedback on the handbook so far. And thank you from my side.
Thank you very much, Katharina, and also for the people. I think we still have 5 minutes remaining. What I would like to ask is Miss Bianca Kapl from AustriaTech to present the P4ITS and how we could support activities for the public procurement innovation. And then I would like to ask you maybe to stay with us for at least 2-3 minutes for any question that may arise. Then I'm asking Bianca to take the floor. Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you. Okay, I try to rush through as we don't have that much time left. And as my colleague Katharina was speaking about, we're talking about learning from each other, and that's what we try to do in another project called P4ITS. P4ITS is not focusing on PCP, but public procurement of innovation. This means what is happening when a public procurer tries to act as first customer, launching customer, and tries to buy innovations. So what is the project exactly about? It is a thematic web network of 18 partners from different organizations, some from the public procurement side, some are road operators, and we try to learn from each other. We try to exchange information on what is PPI, what experience did all the partners make in PPIs in their countries. So what are the objectives of P4ITS? First was creating the network, what we have already done. Then we wanted to provide conditions for mutual learning, so we had presentations, workshops, and learned from each other. We did set up an external consultation process that I will show you later on. Raising awareness was also a very important goal to us, and therefore we did make several workshops. At the moment we are writing key recommendations on PPI, especially in the CRTS sector. So here are some of the partners. As I mentioned before, we are 18 partners and 3 associated partners, and ERTICO is the coordinator of the project. This is the status now of the project. The project will end in May. We already did this external consultation phase, and at the moment we are writing our final paper that will come out soon next year. At the beginning of the project, we really had to discuss what PPI is for us and where is the difference between doing a PCP that Katharina mentioned, which is basically procuring R&D, and doing a PPI. So we started to discuss that the beginning is always the need that you have as a public procurer. And if there's already a solution in the market that fulfills your need, you can do, of course, a regular procurement and go for that. If there's no solution in the market and you need R&D, this will lead you to doing a PCP or doing another kind of funding mechanism that will be in the R&D sector. We also link this to the typical technical readiness levels the European Union is using in Horizon 2020. Of course, they are not exactly fitting if we're talking about services, but we just try to get an overview on where do we start and where do we begin with a PPI or a PCP process. And if you don't have any solution in the market, or just an innovative solution, but which has not been very much commercialized before or not bought in huge amounts, then you are into doing a PPI as a launching customer, as public procurer. We also said that maybe there could be a small overlap between PPI and PCP, which is just for small adoptions or using a technology that already exists and taking it to another sector, like using a software program from another sector, like maybe the healthcare sector industry, and then take it for something else. As I talked about the external consultation phase we did, it was split in two parts. One part was about the definitions and the flowchart that I already presented you. And we did ask stakeholders for feedback. We did ask if it is understandable to them, if they think the definition is correct for them in their understanding. And the second part was a questionnaire, which was done between spring and August 2015, to look in detail into how many knowledge already is there about PPI in connection with CITS or ITS. And I'm going to show you some of the questions that we asked, which were very basic. Those have been the topics of the questionnaire. The first part was general, where the people who answered to the questionnaire were coming from, which sector, and so on. The second part was about the PPI and our definition of the flowchart, if it's understandable, if there are like comments on the TRL level, if people think different than us. Then the third part was really interesting. Like, we did ask the public procurers how much experience they had with PPI. And then we asked in more detail if they maybe already did a PPI in the ITS sector or the CITS sector. So some of the outcomes were like, the flowchart was generally very understandable for the people. Most of them have been experienced in public procurement and came from the sector. Some have been suppliers or from innovation agencies. This was very interesting to us. Like, not many of them did already a joint procurement with other stakeholders. And then if we ask if the organization or the person itself had already information about PPI or experience with it, most of them didn't. So the learning from that was that it was kind of obvious that there needs to be more awareness raising, more guidelines, and more help for public procurers to learn more about the tool or the approach of innovative procurement in general. We also asked them to give some small comments, but according to them is very challenging when doing innovative procurement. And many said that the rules are not clear to them, or the knowledge in their organization does not exist, or it's difficult to be like the first mover, the first public procurer who tries this new instrument out. And after that, we also looked in more detail and discussed about would it be good to do a PPI now for CITS? And this is just a small table. We discussed what in this traditional CITS column, which is the second, with traditional R&D process, we discussed what already happened in the CITS sector, which R&D projects have been there, and at which status do we see us now? Like, we said that Compass 4D projects or the Nordic Way project would be like around prototyping, testing, or TRL 7. So the main outcome of this table was that there is already so much testing going on in the CITS sector. So starting a PPI would not make much sense for the consortium now, but might be really interesting for day 2 adaptations, when it's more about getting a critical mass or making some more adaptations, more standard adaptations, and going in more details. We also made some general recommendations. Those are just some tiny bullet points that mainly came out of the questionnaire that we did. It was really clear to us that raising awareness is still very important. Not many public procurers do know about PPI or don't feel like experienced enough to really try it out. So it would be really great to have some best practice examples and demonstrate the benefits of them. And the next recommendation is more a general one. It's really important to create a culture of using new procurement tools, of using innovations, of also within the public procurement to be more free to try out different approaches, be free to learn, and also make mistakes and learn from them and discuss them with each other. And as I mentioned before, PPI might be really interesting for CITES for the two use cases. And which will be the next steps in the project is we are writing at the moment the final recommendations. There will be a huge legal chapter in there going more detail about the legal situations, also if you procure a service maybe and not a product, which most times much easier when you talk about IPR rights of a product. It's easier to define than if you talk about the rights and the structure with total services. There will also be a special chapter about PPI and CITES where we try to provide some examples of PPI in the transport sectors to make it more clear to the reader what we're exactly talking about. And the last chapter will be about enablers. What do you need to trigger PPI? What frameworks, conditions have to be there? And there will also be more final recommendations, and then we are going more in detail. This will be online, I think about April or May next year. So thank you very much. There are my contact details, and at the end you see the P4ITS homepage where you can find the results of the questionnaire and a discussion paper that is already there, a leaflet, and the contact addresses. Thank you very much. Do I have to hand over again?
Give the screen back to the organizer, please.
Okay. Okay.
For the minutes remaining, I think just a second. Yes, Katharina, maybe you can take over.
Oops. One moment. Here. So, sorry. I was supporting and hand over the screen.
Okay.
So,
okay.
you have it back, Maria? Yeah.
Yes, just a second.
So,
here we go.
Yeah. Thank you very much. As you all know, the time is still over. I would like just to short conclude, and I know this was a lot of information and maybe all your questions will come up later on. So I think it would be best to give you some hints where you can find further information. So we go to my first slide. I only have 3 left to give you some hints. As you heard before, we prepared this guideline, so there are a lot of questions and answers maybe there. So when you're looking at pre-commercial procurement, this could be very helpful. Also, I really recommend you the iMobility Support Help Desk, which you find on iMobility Support/Help Desk. You can send some tickets there, you can send your questions there, and we will answer them as soon as possible. So I think this could be very helpful for all of you attending this webinar today. And I would really recommend, as mentioned by the colleague from the European Commission before, there is a really, really good frequently asked questions section on the website of the European Commission, which is dealing with about, I think, 27 different frequently asked questions. And everybody interested in the topic who wants to look a step more deeper, I would really recommend to have a look at this topic. So I think if there are no further questions coming up, I hope this was very informative for you. You see that there are a lot of incentives also on European level coming up next year. So it's there is really a lot of money in it, I would say, to boost innovation in the ITS sector by using these new instruments. And I hope you made a first step into this topic today, and also on behalf on the organizer ERTICO, I think we will thank you for your patience and for your interest in this topic, and looking forward to receiving your questions and remarks. And thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
We close the webinar here. Thank you.